Hello and welcome to another session of Streaming School. Thank you very much for joining us again. I hope you're looking forward to a wonderful science lesson with my good friend, Mr. Michael Scott. Michael, how are you, buddy?
Yeah, it's fine. I'm okay.
How you finding the first day of homeschooling?
What's that, sorry?
How you finding homeschooling?
Oh, I'm loving it. Yeah. The tasks have been good. So, just getting putting my teaching skills to use again.
Perfect, buddy.
I
Right.
can teach others. It's teaching my own is the problem.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, you just got routines with your own children that make it difficult, don't you?
That's the problem, mate. That's the problem.
Brilliant. Right. Well, the screen is now on your presentation board, Michael. So it's all yours, buddy.
Excellent. Okay. So the plan for this lesson is for us to cover digestion. Before we kind of get into digestion, though, we've got to make a link between what we've learned in previous lessons and obviously what we're going to be learning today. So in our previous lesson, we've looked at the structure of cells. In particular, we've looked at eukaryotic cells. These are cells that contain a nucleus. Now, when you get a group of similar cells working together, well, those similar cells form what's called a tissue. And, lots of cells working together form a tissue. Now, if you get different tissues working together, you form what's called an organ. And then different organs working together form an organ system. And then lots of different organ systems working together forms the organism. And what we're going to do in this lesson today is we're going to focus purely on one of those organ systems. And that organ system is the digestive system. And you can see here that I've got a diagram ready to be labeled. And what we're going to do is we're going to label all of the key organs that make up the digestive system. So I'm just going to rub this part out so we can got some space. And if you take a look at the diagram here, the digestive system, we always start the digestive system in the mouth. Okay, and the mouth is where the food is mechanically broken down, typically by teeth. We add saliva to that food, and that makes it easier to swallow. When we've broken the food down mechanically in the mouth, you'll notice here that we have an esophagus, sometimes referred to as the gullet. And it's the esophagus that takes the food from the mouth and passes the food down the esophagus into the stomach. And you can see the stomach right here. The stomach is a muscular bag that churns the food and where hydrochloric acid is added to the food just to aid the breakdown of that food. And from the stomach, hopefully you can see that there's a very thin tube here that we call the small intestine. And, it's in the small intestine where all of the nutrients from our food is absorbed. And we can look at the structure of the small intestine in future lessons. Now, as the food passes through the small intestine, it ends up in this slightly larger tube here, which is known as the large intestine. And just to give you a bit of extra facts, I suppose, not necessarily GCSE based, but the small intestine is actually longer than the large intestine. But it's in the large intestine where all of the water from our food is then absorbed. And, you know, right here at the bottom, this is where we excrete all of that food, the waste from our food, sorry. And this is referred to as the anus. Now, you know, you could typically be asked in an exam to describe the pathway of food through the digestive system, you know, where you'd have to remember what happens in the mouth, what happens in the stomach, what happens in the small intestine, and, you know, what happens in the large intestine. And you could be, you know, expected to describe the pathway that the food takes through the digestive system. Now, I want to build on this to kind of tie in with you all. I want to tie in a key part of digestion, which is known as enzymes. These are key in the digestive system's function, because what enzymes actually do, these are known as biological catalysts. Okay? And in chemistry, you'll learn that a catalyst is anything that kind of speeds up a reaction. So enzymes speed up the digestion of food. That's the whole purpose of enzymes in the digestive system. Now, we have to look at the different enzymes that are involved in digestion, because there are three main enzymes involved, okay? And there are a few things that you will need to know about each enzyme. For example, you would need to know the name of the enzyme. You would need to know where it's found. So whereabouts in the digestive system is that enzyme found? You'd also need to know what it breaks down. So, you know, each enzyme is responsible for breaking down a different food group. And once that food group's been broken down, what does it produce? Okay, so as I've said before, there are three main enzymes. There are three main enzymes that you will need to know. You will need to know where they're found, what it breaks down, and what it produces. So let's kind of get started with the first one, okay? The first enzyme that's involved in digestion, or, you know, the breakdown of food, is an enzyme that we call amylase. You know, some exam boards or some specifications may refer to this as carbohydrates. They're the same enzyme, and what I mean by that is that they work on the same food group. Now, we find amylase or carbohydrates, remember they're both the same thing, we find them either in the mouth, we can find them in the small intestine, and we can find them in another organ, although it's not involved in digestion. This organ does produce a lot of the enzymes that work in digestion, and that is the pancreas. And if I just label for you right now, the pancreas is right here. It's just this organ below the stomach, okay? right here. The reason I'm doing it in purple is that, the pancreas doesn't actually, it's not involved in the actual breakdown of food, but it does produce enzymes that help with the breakdown of food. So that's where we can find amylase or carbohydrates. You would need to know what food group amylase breaks down. And amylase breaks down starch or really long molecules called carbohydrates. And I suppose the name of the enzyme kind of gives it away. Carbohydrates breaks down carbohydrates. And remember that you can find, carbohydrates or starch in foods like potatoes, bread, cereals, rice. A lot of those foods tend to pasta. We can find, the carbohydrates or starch in those types of food. But you also need to know that when amylase breaks down this starch or carbohydrate, that it produces sugar. To be a bit more specific, it's actually glucose. So when we break down starch using amylase, we produce a lot of sugar. And that's why, if you eat a lot of like pasta or potatoes, it can lead to having a higher glucose level in your blood. And this is the reason why, because, the amylase in your mouth breaks down that starch into sugar. Let's look at the second enzyme. So that's our first one. If we look at this second enzyme, the second enzyme is called protease. Protease is another enzyme that breaks down a food group, and hopefully you can probably tell by the name what food group it breaks down. But let's just discuss first of all where it's found. So protease is found in the stomach. It's the only enzyme actually to be found in the stomach. We find it in the small intestine, and again, it's produced by the pancreas. Protease breaks down proteins. And, we need proteins in our diet for, growth, for repair. We typically find proteins in, foods like chicken and fish. But it's the protease in our body that breaks down those proteins and turns them into amino acids. I may not have been very clear before, but the reason that we need to break, these molecules down into much smaller ones. So, this molecule is small. This molecule is quite small. The products of digestion are much smaller than the food group. So, amino acids are much smaller than proteins, and sugar is much smaller than starch. The reason that it needs to be broken down is so that it can get into our bloodstream a lot, easier. So our final one is lipase. And lipase is another enzyme that is found in the body. And again, it breaks down a different food group. You need to know where we find lipase. So lipase is typically found in the small intestine. You'll notice that, all three enzymes are found in the small intestine. And lipase is also produced in the pancreas. So the pancreas is quite an important organ, as it produces most of the enzymes that our body uses. But lipase breaks down lipids. Now, lipids is just a scientific term for the word fats. And when we break down these fats using lipase, the fats break down into something we call fatty acids. And we also produce another molecule, which for some reason a lot of students tend to forget this one, but it's called glycerol. Sorry. Glycerol. So these are the three enzymes that are involved in digestion. The importance of these enzymes is that they all turn these large molecules like starch, protein, and lipids. These enzymes turn these large molecules into much smaller ones. And the reason we want these much smaller molecules is because they can be absorbed a lot easier into the bloodstream. And obviously thus we can use these nutrients for different things. You know, the sugar is for respiration, and amino acids are things for like growth and repair and for building up proteins. And guys, that is everything for digestion. So there is a task for you today where you've got to think about which enzyme comes into play depending on, you know, the food group that you eat. And I want you to just have a think about what enzyme you use, what enzyme would be used when eating different types of food. All right, guys, have a good day.
Thank you so much, Michael. Really, really appreciate it. How's the rest of your day looking, buddy?
Yeah, everything's looking fine. Let me stop presenting. Everything's looking fine today. Yeah, everything's looking fine.
Yeah, I think Gabriel gave up on homeschooling after about 4 minutes.
4 minutes, yeah, that's a record.
It was good. It was good. Yeah, I'm just going to try and beat 4 minutes tomorrow. Amira and Layla have been diligent, to be fair, but Gabriel gave up after 4 minutes.
4 minutes, yeah.
You should have seen the slap in the face, Michael. He said, "Daddy, when's real school coming back?" So,
that's the thing. There's too much distraction at home. Way too much.
I was saying something to someone about that this morning. It's just you've got your school routines, you've got your home routines, and then suddenly expecting home to become a school routine is different. But you know, this is I think the third or fourth week we've been doing this, and so yeah, that's been pretty positive, to be fair. But Gabriel, like anyone who can't read, however much teaching experience I have, anyone who can't read, I'm not in the game.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough.
How old are you? But your youngest, you're not even expecting them to do anything, right?
Say again.
Your youngest is 1, right?
Youngest is 1, yeah. No, she's just learning to walk. That's her homeschooling.
I wish I could go back to those days.
The other 2 are just headache. This is my get out for the next. This has been my get out for the last 20 minutes.
Streaming school, here to save teachers as well in more ways than one.
Exactly.
Well, have a great rest of the day, Michael. Thank you so much, my friend.
Nice one. Have a good day, there, guys. Yeah.
God bless.
Take care.
See, Nish, you don't know the struggle. You don't know the struggle. It's, to be fair, yeah, like Gabriel literally is like, when's school back on? I hate being at home with you. So yeah. Anyway, all over to you to lead us out, my dear.
All right, cool. So here is the optional task today. It was biology today. It is what enzymes can break down foods like chicken, bread, and pasta.
Brilliant. Okay, let's hope that gets people a little, little focused as well. Really look forward to speaking to you a little later on, my dear.
Yeah, speak to you in a bit.
See you in 20 minutes for Spanish?
Yeah.